Hey guys, welcome to the jungle that is the United States under Donald Trump, and especially when it comes to his foreign policy concerning our great friends in Ukraine and, of course, the evil empire in Russia. Now, we've had a pretty turbulent past 48 hours. There's been a lot of rumors floating around about some kind of so called peace plan, whether it would be enforced in Ukraine, what the contents of that so called plan might be, and whether or not it reflects the actual policy of the United States government. Well, as I said in yesterday's video, it doesn't look like it. And we've got more facts and details to really kind of flesh this out. And I'm going to give that to you here and now. And I want to try to cut through the noise so you guys can let out a breath, calm your ulcers down. It's going to be okay. It appears now, as I suspected yesterday, that this is really just Steve Witkoff going off the reservation, being rogue with his friend Kirill Dmitriev to try to leak selectively certain parts of a plan to set the narrative for negotiations. Now, that is not any way to conduct foreign policy, but when you've got the Lord of the Flies organizational sort of structure and management that we have in this White House, that's really who it is, and it makes sense. We're kind of getting used to it, and by now, as disturbing as it may be. Now, in this full plan that we're going to look at in a moment, I'm going to talk to you about this from two perspectives. Number one, as someone who has a lot of legal experience in interpreting contracts, I can kind of go through and tell you what is and is not enforceable in here. Spoiler alert, nothing is really binding on Russia, and all the limitations are actually on Ukraine. And secondly, as someone who's become, given my experience in that country, having served in the armed forces, and just become very attuned over the last few years to the geopolitical doctrine of Russia known as Russian bullshit. Really, how else can you say it? It is something that permeates this document and shows it's done in bad faith. And in fact, it's a provocation. It's an insult. It's not a serious document. All right? So let's get to it. But before we do that, I think one thing I want to tell you guys is, and I think it's important to set this background, we in the West, in the United States, we don't really have mass graves in our country. We've never seen, what it's like for millions of people to die right in front of us. The Ukrainians have seen that. And in fact, this war did not start in 2022. This war did not start in 2014. It is a long thread through history and a continuation of a genocide reaching back, if not centuries, at least 100 years, where 13 to 14 million, perhaps up to that amount, Ukrainians have been murdered and are buried all across the country by Russia. In fact, more people, significantly more people, were killed. Ukrainians were killed by the Russians than Jews were killed by the Nazis. And I don't like to make, comparisons like that. Everybody's suffering is different. Every situation matters. Every life is obviously beautiful before God. But it's important that people understand what Ukraine has been through, and illuminating that is critically important. Imagine if, for example, the Holocaust never truly ended. We saved the Jews from the concentration camps. The Nazis were forced to move into a different part of the area, and the Jews were in this territory on the left, and the Nazis were on the right. And yet every day in the 21st century, there was a war where the Nazis invaded, and they were raping, bombing, occupying, and killing Jews every single day with the most horrible weapons that I've ever seen by mankind. They were firing cruise missiles into children's beds at night. That there were cities where 1 million Jews, like Kharkiv in Ukraine, had to go to school underground because Russians would try to murder them otherwise. If Jews were still being burned alive in their apartments, and we heard them screaming on social media, live and in color, what would the world say and what would the world do? Because that's what's happening now. The genocide and the mass murder of Ukrainians that has been a staple of Russian foreign policy from the past until now is a continuation, not a new conflict. It's the same old story. And it's not just me saying that. Vladimir Putin does that. It's him. It's his theory. It's his basis. All right, let's get to this plan. The full plan, it says, Ukraine's sovereignty will be confirmed, number one. Absolutely will not. That is comical. The entire document, as we'll see, totally destroys Ukraine's sovereignty. Okay, not doing good. Number two, a comprehensive non-aggression agreement will be concluded between Russia, Ukraine, and Europe. Just like the Budapest Memorandum, just like every other agreement that Russia has ever reached with Ukraine, let me tell you something. Any contract or any document you get from Russia saying they'll promise to do something that's not backed up by the force of bullets, lead, and firepower is basically something to wipe your ass with and throw out the window. It's trash. Number four, or sorry, number 3, it is expected that Russia will not invade neighboring countries. I mean, it gets like better and better. This is comical. I mean, is this a joke? That Russia will not invade neighboring countries. Really? You can set your watch by Russia invading neighboring countries. Like the laws of physics, gravity, the sun coming up tomorrow, Russia will invade. They will genocide. They will mass murder. Syria, look at Aleppo compared to Mariupol. Look at Chechnya. I mean, this is who they are. Look at Africa. It's in their blood. And again, from a legal perspective here, what I will say is that's not enforceable. It is expected by whom? It's not a binding obligation on Russia. They don't say Russia promises will not do X. That's why, because it's not a serious document. Number 4, a dialogue will be held between Russia and NATO, mediated by the United States, to resolve all security issues and create conditions for de-escalation. Okay, blah, blah, blah. This is what we know is Russian bullshit. Flowery language. This sounds good, but it contains no binding obligations. This is, in fact, this is like a future place where you will see propaganda come in. This is the current version of when they say the Minsk agreements with respect to 2014 and so forth. Not enforceable. It's just fog, smoke, and again, BS. Number 5, Ukraine will receive reliable security guarantees. I thought all security guarantees were reliable. Putting reliable in front of security guarantees doesn't wipe away all the history of how Ukraine has been betrayed since the 1994 Budapest Memorandum. It doesn't mean anything. A security guarantee is Tomahawk cruise missiles. It's not a promise. The size of the Ukrainian armed forces will be reduced to 600,000 personnel. Number 6, since when does the invader get to dictate to the victim what size their army can be? There's no limitations on the Russian military in this document, is there? And why does it matter if Russia, as in number 2, is expected not to invade? Tells you everything. Number 7, Ukraine agrees to enshrine in its constitution that it will not join NATO. Who the hell is Russia to dictate to Ukraine anything about their organic legal document? Imagine this. Imagine the United States got invaded. Imagine that our children got raped in front of their parents and killed. Imagine they blew up our dams like they did in Kherson. Imagine that there were graves stretching for miles like there are in Mariupol, as you can see from the satellite videos, filled with civilians. And then to end the war that they started, they told America, I don't like your First Amendment. That freedom of speech, get rid of it. Second Amendment, you don't need, this right to bear arms. Declaration of Independence, I don't like the language you use. Can you imagine how that would be received? Well, that's exactly what this is. Put yourself in the shoes of the Ukrainians, and then you'll understand why they hate Russia so much, justifiably so. Then it talks about they can't, Europe can't basically have any military forces in Ukraine. Shouldn't matter if they're not going to invade. Number 9, about the fighter jets, same thing, continuing. And then we get into like this situation where, so that's all like dictating what the military forces can be. And remember, a security force in Ukraine has always been kind of a perceived and talked about in Europe, and even with respect to Donald Trump in the United States, as part of the architecture that would be necessary to have an actual enforceable and just peace and a settlement of this conflict. Russia doesn't care. They don't want to end it. They want to continue fighting. They want to regroup, and they want to make Ukraine more vulnerable to destroy the country as a nation entirely. Okay, so 10, some of this stuff is, I expect the Russians to screw over people and lie, cheat, and steal. But what we see here is the United States taking the other knife and stabbing Ukraine in the back on the other side. The U.S. will receive compensation for the guarantee, and then it goes down. And if you look at it here, number 12, you start to see Donald Trump trying to make money off this situation. The creation of Ukraine Development Fund to invest in fast-growing industries. That sounds good. Kind of go infrastructure. But wait a second. You're going down to number 14, that the frozen funds will be used as follows. $100 billion in frozen Russian assets will be invested in U.S.-led efforts to rebuild and invest in Ukraine. And here we get to it. The corruption just bleeding out. The U.S. will receive 50% of the profits from the venture. 50% of the profits are going to go to the United States, meaning Donald Trump and all his billionaire friends are going to make money in all these different forms of reconstruction. That's what you're looking at here. 15, a joint American-Russian working group. I mean, some of this stuff, it's all kind of stupid and continuing. Russia will enshrine in its policy of non-aggression towards Europe. Okay, I'm glad. They're going to put it in law because we know Russia always follows the law. Again, this is a joke. It means nothing. You see how there's nothing enforceable in here against Russia? The foreign countries cannot enforce Russia's law against it. There's no actual ability to have, NATO forces in Ukraine. There's no ability for Ukraine to have advanced weapons and a large military. It is all about Russian promises to the extent they're even expressed. Those are worth nothing. And here we go. Look at number 20. It's just one outrage after another. All Nazi ideology and activities must be rejected and prohibited. This is just a lie. Okay, let's get down to something that's more meat and potatoes here. Number 21. This is the territorial stuff. So I think the most important parts of this agreement are, in fact, that Ukraine cannot have a functioning military ability to defend itself, that has to give up all the territories, the entire Donbass. Things about how Russia makes no promises and there's nothing really enforceable to keep them from invading again. I mean, those are really the main things here. And that's what you have. They want Ukraine, and this is a total non-starter and they know it, to give up everything in the Donbass. And again, while Ukraine only has, maybe 15% of that, there's 2 points here that are critical. Russia wants legal recognition from Ukraine, from the United States and the international community for what it took by force. If we allow that, that sets an impossible precedent. It's something, once you cross that Rubicon, you can never come back. It is a law that has to be enforced, ironclad, black and white. Secondly, if you give up the fortress cities of Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, and Konstantinivka, those are on high ground. They're fortified. You're giving up the entire position for the entire eastern part of Ukraine to be further invaded, even going farther east to west, towards Kyiv, Kharkiv, and those areas. You just can't do it. It's impossible. Everything else, freezing the line of control geographically. And then there's, again, number 24, a humanitarian committee will be established to resolve outstanding issues. You see how Russians negotiate. Maximalist demands, lies, cheat, steal, murder. Everything that's left in negotiation means it will go nowhere, of course. Ukraine will hold elections in 100 days. This is just meant to be insulting and provoking, and it is outrageous. Trying to control the internal affairs of Ukraine is how we got in this position in the first place. Ukraine is its own country. It'll hold its elections when it damn well wants. It's none of Russia's concern. 26 is something that's different and interesting. I want to talk to you about that for a moment because there is some reporting. What this says is that all parties in this conflict will receive full amnesty. Ukrainians will receive full amnesty, including in the government, and then Russia and all the war criminals will receive full amnesty. And to me, that should be as non-negotiable as the territorial considerations out east and giving up the Donbass. Because if you allow this to happen, it sets an impossible precedent for future conflicts, just like it does recognizing invaded territories that are taken by force. You cannot have that because there's no deterrence for future war criminals. They know they can always negotiate away their war crimes and their genocide as part of the leverage they obtained by the fact that they invaded, okay? And we cannot have a rules-based order in this planet, on this world, what we fought for in World War II, if this is agreed to. But there's another rumor out there or some reporting that this was actually inserted by someone in the Ukrainian government because maybe they've been war profiteering and they want to get away with it. If that's true, if there is someone in the Ukrainian government who has been trading the right of all the victims to get compensation, to get justice, so they could steal money during the war, which should be treason, honestly, that person needs to go to prison, needs to be out of the government, and this cannot happen. That would be the gravest betrayal of the Ukrainian people I could possibly imagine. And finally, look at number 27. Again, the corruption is all through this for the Trump administration. This document actually, it accomplishes absolutely nothing other than insulting Ukraine, destroying its sovereignty, and enriching Donald Trump. What could be more fucking grotesque than that in just the history of our planet? I mean, oh my God, you think about that, put it together. This agreement will be legally binding. Its implementation will be monitored and guaranteed by the Peace Council headed by President Trump. The Peace Council, this is just intended to placate him. And the Peace Council, that doesn't really bode too well. I mean, the same president who's been mass murdering people, committing what amounts to state-sponsored terrorism, in my opinion, I approved it. Look at my Substack. There's an article in there. in the Venezuela, in the Caribbean? Are you talking about the same peace council guy who's been threatening to execute Democrats and his political opponents today? The same peace council president who's about to bomb Venezuela? It's a joke. It's ridiculous. But you can see how this is drawn up. It's all about Trump. Screw the Ukrainians. Let the Russians. And that's it. Okay. So you see what this is all about. Now, there's something I want to look at quickly. And this is the statement of, we've seen what this is. It's a maximalist demands. It's Russia actually being worse than it was in its prior negotiations. It's the same basic agreement, even worse, however, than what was already been rejected by Rubio a few months ago as completely unworkable. Now, compare that to what Mike Waltz said today at the UN. And we'll just go through the main points. And you can see they're totally inconsistent. And I believe this is the actual, and this is the good news part of this video, this is the actual position of the United States government officially at this time. And he says, the only diplomacy to durable path to peace is, negotiation and diplomacy, so on and so forth. We've asked Russia to halt its attacks and meet directly with Ukraine to negotiate a powerful settlement, a peaceful settlement. Okay, being honest about Russia's culpability, at least on that front. The fighting continues, tragically causing more civilian casualties. And we also see more incursions into the airspace of their countries, including our NATO allies. Okay, good. Mentioning that about what Russia's done to our NATO allies. Actions that risk widening this conflict. And then he correctly identifies that Ukraine's attacks on Russian soil are not about civilians, but about destroying its energy infrastructure. I mean, so far, decent. It has endured, Russia has endured several severe international sanctions. Well, it hasn't endured them, it's put them on itself, but whatever. The costs have been devastating. Now, he says Russia and Ukraine's leaders must negotiate. Russia and Ukraine's leaders must accept a ceasefire. Again, much more even in the language and tone than the agreement we just looked at, or the full plan that we just looked at. The international community standpoint, here, again, this is totally different. This is putting pressure on Russia that all countries need to stop buying your Russian oil, and that further costs will be put on Russia. Again, there's consequences here discussed. None of that in the document we just saw. And again, it talks about how Russia has kidnapped Ukrainian children. This is one-sided against Russia. And it says, continuing, like when you look at this position, it's not super specific, but it identifies correctly what Russia's culpable for and that Ukraine is the victim. And that is completely inconsistent with what we just saw. And this is more of what we've come to expect as Trump has evolved forward. I saw somebody post today, and it's a good description. I believe it was in the Atlantic. Just came out a couple hours ago, that this is Trump fumbling the ball on the 3-yard line. Things were going well. He had the right policy, putting pressure on Russia, and then they do this. A complete screw up by Witkoff, a complete, run around by Kirill Dmitriev. So that's where we're at. Okay. And then one final thing kind of to understand here is sort of how we got through this and how can we divine things going forward. This is an article in the Kyiv Independent. It really kind of explains what the hell happened from sort of a procedural understanding. Now, this 28-point abomination, it shows that basically, let's go up real quick here. Russia, okay, so here you go. Moscow's old wish list, new messenger. The plan's origins are raising fresh questions about how Moscow found a new foothold in Trump's orbit. Okay, because what had happened is this had basically been rejected by the Europeans, by Trump, effectively using Rubio. And it just popped up all of a sudden. According to officials familiar with internal discussions, the document closely resembles the same Russian draft that derailed the planned Budapest meetings last month, the one Rubio rejected outright. Okay. This time, Russia reportedly brought it to Witkoff, who proved far more receptive, of course. The Russians sensed a weakness and an open door. They took the same wish list that Rubio shut down and found someone else in Washington willing to run with it. There you go. Lord of the Flies situation. When you have a White House running like that, this is what you get. So it has now evolved from this one-sided, you will take this, to a living document. And there's kind of some pullback. We saw what Mike Waltz said. Rubio tweeted last night. inconsistent with what was in that, again, that 28-point plan. So I think we can say confidently at this time, what is in this article, I commend it to the reader, go look at it because it's very interesting how it describes everything. Ukraine's not going to be forced to sign anything. The United States doesn't have the leverage it believes it does. And things should work out. And really what we need to focus on now, I think Ukraine looking forward, is placating the Trump administration, not signing anything stupid, and working on the process of its military training, recruitment, and retaining soldiers, improving that. I mean, everything that Ukraine is going to, the victory is not going to come from someone else. It's not fundamentally going to come from the United States. It's not going to come from, Europe. It's going to have to come, and I think in every single small action that is taken in the military, in the government, doing the best that you can do every single day, in every single act, every single communication, every single, training, all of it in civil society and the military, cleaning that up, doing the best you can. That's where victory is going to come from. All those inches are going to add up at the end of the day, and we're going to finally get justice. And that's what the focus needs to be. And just delaying things, because there's going to be a new Congress in 2026, and Trump is getting weakened, and he's becoming a lame duck. So he will be less prominent in these negotiations and discussions as time goes forward. Weather the storm, come to understand it. Every one of these situations that happens where we get this crazy plan and people are like, oh shit, what's going on? And then you finally learn how this thing kind of snaked around and got to the point where it ended up being leaked to someone in the media who was gullible. That's a learning opportunity. Understand it, breathe it, and know this is how you're going to get through it, okay? But it comes from in here. That's my advice. That's my thought. That's my feeling on it. The United States should be helping much more, but you have the war that you wish you could fight, and you have the war that you actually are going to fight. And Ukraine can do it. They've come this far, and they'll get over the finish line. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. DM me, message me, whatever. Happy to talk. I'm always down to dork out on this kind of stuff. Love you guys. Take care. Thanks for supporting Ukraine.